So it's now time for a panel, and we're going to talk about the state of Web3 tech, layers 0 to 2. So in this panel, we're going to explore the core foundations of blockchain technology. The panelists are going to dive deeper into blockchain's architecture, focusing on the core infrastructure technologies, including layers 0 or 1, 2, and explore the relationship with these technologies and the Web3 innovation trajectory. So for me to present the moderator, it's a great pleasure. She is Danny Rowshandel, who is a venture partner at CVVC, and she's also an expert in startup acceleration, Web3 applications, and alternative asset investment. So please give it up for Danny and her panelists.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the panel here. And I'm very glad to actually welcome everyone here. I have a great group of panelists that I have the honor to share the stage together with. So Shyam is here, the chief strategist at QPQ Global. Manu, the head of platform development at Lisk. Joe Petrowski, who is part of the Common Good Parachains team, lead at the Web3 Foundation, and Erick de Moura, who is the CEO at Cartesi. And today we will discuss the state of Web3 technology, focusing and diving deeper into layer 0, 1, and 2. So I can imagine that some of the audience sitting here is not really clear about those definitions pertaining to layer 0, 1, and 2. So perhaps we should start with defining that specifically. So who would like to start with trying to define those different layers?
I can go. So the way we think about layer 0s at QPQ is that we think about it as Reaper. So first you have layer 1s that provide all the resources. They provide consensus, assets, and smart contracts, and so on. But layer 0 is the infrastructure that allows people to build businesses on and access all of those resources. So you can kind of aggregate all of that capability out there. So you have resources, infrastructure, and then you can build platforms and applications on top of it. So yeah, layer 0 is not a blockchain in itself, but it provides all the pieces to access all the other layers.
Yeah, so not to completely tear apart the context of this entire panel, but I actually see that what you described is more of what I would call layer 3, which is off topic for the panel. But I see layers as going like they provide some sort of context to the layer that's above them. So if you are on layer 1, you should always be able to ask a layer 0. You should have some kind of shared understanding of finality or like execution context between each other. So if two layer 1s want to interact with each other in a trust-free manner, they could ask a layer 0 that they're both connected to, hey, which block is final? Like, what context do we agree on? What context are we evaluating each other's messages in? So if you have like a bridge between two different blockchains, I think we kind of all saw this summer that you can't always trust the messages over those bridges because you could receive some assets over a bridge, but then those assets on the sending side could be compromised. And now you need to know, well, do I really own those assets? Do these wrapped assets where I am actually make sense anymore? And so if they're actually connected over a layer below them, like a layer 0, they can actually interact in a trust-free way because they have some shared understanding of what is final. So you would never have a scenario where two layer 1s who are on the same layer 0 would have one of them reverted to a state that's prior to another one. So you never have to worry about your assets being lost on an origination chain. So you can always trust message provenance, and that messages will be acted on in the way that you expect. And likewise with like a layer 2 on a layer 1, two layer 2s on the same layer 1, they can share the same context about knowing what is actually final on the layer 1.
Yeah, just
go ahead.
Yeah, adding on top of that, I think maybe just to go back a little bit, what Web3 means, like to understand like what Web2 is. All of you are familiar with like the OSI model, right? So how the applications are built right now are kind of going to be built on Web3. The infrastructure that we are building now is what Web3 is about. Like all the layers that Joe talked about is the infrastructure that OSI was established. On top of that, like how you developed all the data layer applications like Twitter or Facebook or anything that we have today right now. So what we are trying to establish here is the layers for this and to build on Web3 for the decentralized applications.
Yeah, that's been a good introduction, I think, to kick off the discussion on layer 0, 1, and 2. And I think connected to that is often the discussion within blockchain technology, which is the blockchain trilemma, right? Which was coined by Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, stating that there are 3 pillars for blockchain infrastructures, right? Decentralization, security, and scalability. And big challenges that different blockchain networks have is that they're only able to satisfy 2 of those conditions, and one of them suffers. So what are your views in relation to those solutions that are out there today in the Web3 space, and how in their capacity to address that specific challenge? Eric, perhaps you can start off.
I like to think of the trilemma problem by evoking a metaphor, right? If I go to a bank and I have 20 cashiers and I have a queue of people on public blockchains, monolithic chains, it's just like each user is going to the 20 at the same time, one by one. So it doesn't scale, right? And in the case of blockchains, even worse, because you have a single CPU core, in the case of monolithic chains like Ethereum, that have to supply computational power to everyone, all the users and all the applications. So we like the approach in which we use the blockchain, the consensus layer, as a very secure, very decentralized layer, but we don't abuse. We have to use it with parsimony, right? So one approach is using optimistic rollups, for instance, which is what we do, that we resort to the blockchain as a Supreme Court in case of disputes.
Could you explain what that is for those that maybe are not familiar with that?
So basically, if you're using a chain like Ethereum, every single transaction and computation is going through all the nodes, all the full nodes. So as I said, it doesn't scale. And we saw that happening in very interesting ways back when CryptoKitties was launched. A very simple game, right? It was as simple as tic-tac-toe. And it put down the entire network. So the approach of optimistic rollups is basically you send transactions in a compacted way to the blockchain, and you do all the computation on a separate system, on a separate layer. And assuming that computation will go well, someone will inform the truth back to the chain, and normally they will do. And only in the rare cases that there is someone acting in a fishy way, then the blockchain is used as Supreme Court. So you're not using the scarce computational resources of the blockchain to do all the computation and running all transactions.
I mean, you guys all are working on different capacities, right? Some of you are involved in the layer 1 side, the layer 0 side, addressing these different challenges. So perhaps you could start off with another angle.
Yeah, sure. I think Lisk is a blockchain application platform, kind of enabling the Web3 infrastructure in the sense that, we are building layer 0 and layer 1 solutions. What I mean is that, we have the interoperability solutions where you could have your own self-sovereign blockchain applications, right? And then you could have as many blockchain applications you want connected to the Lisk main chain. And in the future, we are kind of bridging to the other protocols like Ethereum in the coming years. So solving the scalability is, as I think Joe and mentioned about, having the protocol neutrality, meaning that having the ability to interact with different protocols is key to have the shared security. And I think from Lisk point of view, I think we are having the interoperability as a solution to solve the scalability problem.
Yeah, Polkadot has a very opinionated approach to how we solve this trilemma, and I would even say decentralization is very fuzzy as a concept, but we decided on the pre-call not to go too much down that rabbit hole. But just one of the general principles of engineering is that if you can isolate and modularize things, you can design each component better and make them interact in a better way. And that's really what we've tried to do with Polkadot, is the relay chain. Polkadot itself just defines this abstract definition of what a blockchain is in a language called WebAssembly, which is a very general purpose language. Like if you've ever used like Google Meet or Zoom in your browser or something, it's running on WebAssembly. It's very well maintained for 20 or 30 years. And we just say that like, hey, a blockchain, it's not even an EVM, it's not smart contracts, it just has like some state and some program of how that state changes. And you can connect a bunch of different layer ones. And these layer ones, like Eric said, they're basically like, they're a virtualization of a single CPU. So they can run these programs on the CPU that is a layer one blockchain. And but instead of having like everybody try to use the same layer one blockchain, we just say like, okay, well, we have like a bunch of like execution cores where we can take some validators from Polkadot and assign them to this core, and they're dedicated to that that single layer one blockchain. But what the layer 0 does is it provides the security level of saying like, okay, we all share some context. We all share like an understanding that we are at, block height 100,000, and that everybody is at this block height. Nobody has been attacked and reverted, because you'd have to attack and revert the entire system. So everybody can execute their layer ones and get this scalability by adding more and more layer ones while maintaining the security and decentralization of the entire system.
So I think if we look at this at a different angle, why does it matter? Ultimately, it's about projects being able to use ones that where the blockchain trilemma isn't an issue. The way to do that is actually build on the strengths of all the chains. So if you take consensus, for example, why take consensus from one place? It could go down, or it has issues, so it might be too centralized. So what we've built is a consensus as a service. So you can actually take consensus from, aggregate all of this capacity, and it's available. So this is how you're getting decentralization by actually using all of the chains, and you use it using different contexts. So for example, if you want to do payments and it needs to be within 2 seconds, you use certain layer ones for that. But if you're moving a high value asset, then you use different chains for that. So you're getting decentralization by using the strengths of all the different chains, and in that, through parallelization and other methods, you also get speed and security. So yeah, that's how we think about it.
I mean, so far we've been discussing the architecture of blockchain technology, right? The foundations for which businesses can also build decentralized applications on top of those blockchain infrastructures. So leading into that, looking into these applications that are being built on these networks, these different networks that exist today, such as Polkadot and Ethereum and Solana and others, what are some of the user experience challenges that we are experiencing so far? And do you believe that that is a single problem, or are there is it a multifaceted problem that is hurting the experience so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the experience so far mostly comes down to just the maturity, especially around the tooling and the protocol levels. There's been a lot of changes, a lot of new protocols, and there's just not like a really mature tooling suite that application developers are used to using. And nor are a lot of people used to building Web3 applications in general. Like the companies who succeeded in Web2, like Amazon and Netflix, and Facebook, they weren't the companies that were very active in Web 1. Like a lot of companies in Web 1, they tried to just move like a newspaper onto the internet, and those companies didn't succeed. It was a whole new wave of media companies that succeeded in Web 2, and I imagine that there'll be a wave of Web 3 native companies that actually create something that's completely new. I'm actually very much a user experience optimist. I think user experience in Web 3 will be much better than in Web 2, especially because Web3 provides certain guarantees about the data and systems that you're interacting with. You don't have to trust Twitter. You don't have to trust Instagram. Your data is not in some silo. And you can kind of like, to make a concrete example, when you meet somebody, you have this like awkward phase of like connecting with them on like WhatsApp, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Like it's silly to have like, you have like one social graph and you have to make the same connection 5 or more times. And you could have a single social graph where you just make a connection one time with somebody and say, well, this is social or professional or both or whatever, and you can build hundreds of different applications and user experiences on top of that, and everybody gets the guarantee that they're interacting with the same social graph. And I also don't think that like Web 2 is just somehow the epitome of user experience, and like we've just we've figured it out. This is what user experience is supposed to be. And so I don't think that people will necessarily like cling to Web 2 user experiences and not learn new technologies. So if you kind of back up like even like 20 or 30 years, like, and think about a QWERTY keyboard and a mouse, like this is not the most natural tool to use. Like maybe it is now because people are so used to it, but like I had to take a typing class in high school. Like that was part of my curriculum. And I know that like my parents and their friends actually like took time off from work to go to a class to learn like how to type on a keyboard. Like there were typing classes. And it's not because it was the mechanical keyboard didn't dominate computing because it was a great user experience. It sucks as a user experience, but people were willing to invest the time to learn to use that tool because they recognize the power of computing. And I think when people recognize the power of Web3, they'll be willing to learn to use new tools to engage with different types of user experiences.
Eric, what's your perspective? I mean, there might be also a learning curve involved, right, for new users, and especially if you were to say older users, right, that are maybe less familiar with adopting new technologies. So do you share the same angle as Joe has, or do you have a different viewpoint?
I share a similar angle, and I'm actually eager to see things going beyond the first wave of successful NFT and DeFi, right? I think those are the early experiments in Web3. There is a huge promise that Web3 will provide better businesses and better distribution of power to everyone, and we want to see decentralized networks like social media, decentralized and other applications that are more sophisticated. And I think when you talk about UX, I think we also need to unblock the problems that developers have nowadays, right? Interacting with blockchains from a developer's standpoint is really, really hard. And the EVM, for instance, is great and to do several simple applications like DeFi, NFT. But once you need to do more complicated stuff that's similar to Web 2, we need to move on and have something that has much more computational capacity and also for developers, more tools and more components and stacks for them. That basically touches what we do because as we can scale computation to tens of thousands of times compared to the blockchain, you can run, for instance, an OS like Linux, and instead of using the EVM and the developer having to program using a standalone language like Solidity, now they're able to use the world of open source, right? So that's a big step. So by reaching this level of computation, you can unlock this. So I firmly believe that once it's there, then we can have new kinds of applications that weren't possible. And then you're going to see, that's going to have a deep impact in how people are going to use Web3.
So I think there's all the technical stuff, but the reality is that if you take just two personas, right? So if you're building a project, you decide you want to join Web3, which is the other 99% who haven't joined. Right now, they need to choose where to deploy on. And that's a big stress. You need to choose one chain. There's no one chain that has more than 10% at best. So you're already limiting yourself to one place. And if you want to be on many chains, you now need to find different developers and deal with different security risks. So the way I think about it is like you have to operate different supermarkets in different towns and use marketing to that local place. So if we want the other 99% to join, they need to join Web3. And you need to make it like an Amazon experience where you're building in one place and you can reach the whole market. So that's the business side, and we're not there yet. And that's something, using a layer 0 approach, we're trying to approach. And at the moment, we're consolidating the EVM chains, but that is just 40% of the market. There's still another 60% who do different languages. And as the guy said, there's newer languages coming and different environments, and that all needs to be compatible as well. So that's that side. And just on the end user side, 95% of the users don't go cross-chain because it is so stressful and it takes time and it's too complicated. So to be able to use the whole of Web3, it needs to be one click to anywhere. And that's something that layer 0s could solve as well.
So I mean, so far we've identified different opportunities and also challenges, right, from different angles. So looking at this drive for innovation, which party should drive that? Who should take the lead, right? Are these the business practitioners? technical personnel? Should it be the consumer demands or a combination of all these factors? What are your views on that?
I think in general, I think like we have several challenges actually. As Joe pointed out, we started with, we figured out what Web3 is, and we have all the solutions actually. So there are a lot of problems at the infrastructure layer as well. If you see how you can easily upgrade your forks, whenever there's a fork, how easily you can upgrade and then provide bring in a lot more relayers to incentivize them to have the protocol secure. And I think in order for all of this, so we have to first address a lot of infrastructural problems. But at the same time, I think to go mass adoption or to, as you pointed out, there is the adoption problem as well as infrastructure problem. So so there is a regulatory problems as well as there is a standards problem. How to change can be interoperable. There is no clear protocol, right? So there must be a coexistence of protocols like ISO standards, similar to ISO standards, to be easily have two different ecosystems. To users doesn't have to worry about how they will be able to deploy their the contacts. Like he was saying that users should have just one-click experience, and to be able to use the ecosystem underneath it. It doesn't matter whether you're using AWS or Azure or it doesn't matter for them. User at the end of the day, they're having the smooth user experience. I think I would see that in the future, the projects are working a lot more closer to bridge this gap with having the standardized protocol to be able to interact with different chains in the ecosystem and solving actually the problem together actually rather than being isolated. I think the ecosystem has to come together to evolve the protocol and then have a standards.
And speaking of standards here, right, who should drive that? Because we have been speaking about the lack of standards for a long time in our industry, right? And there have been parties that try to push for it, but so far we have not been able to succeed yet, right? So what changes do we need to make, right, to be able to create those standards and have them be adopted by the mainstream parties?
Yeah, I mean, I have a very long horizon view, and I think it's better to actually let things get sorted out properly and not have somebody just come down and say right, this is it, we figured it out, we're just going to leave it like this. And adding to what you said, I think it takes, there's room for everybody to contribute and participate, whether you come from technical, business, social, or you're concerned about privacy or data use in Web 2 and you want to just try something new. I think we try to take a very scientific methods-driven development approach. That we come up with ideas about how things should work and be designed from first principles. We come up with hypotheses about them. We try to build them with engineers, and then we try to use them, not just among ourselves, but in our business team, in our marketing, in our communication with other people, and just try to see how users react. And then we try to verify, was our hypothesis correct? And you learn some things and you go back and try again. There's room for everybody in that process. And I don't think anybody, it doesn't matter if you're from business or from tech or from research, nobody has enough information to just say okay, this should be it. We're just going to set a standard like this. And that's not even that's not a well-principled approach to any kind of design, not just in computer systems, but airplanes and satellites and stuff. You come up with an idea and say, I think this would be valuable, but let's try to make a prototype. You don't just come up with an idea and build a $300 million passenger airplane. You do prototypes, you do testing, you validate you validate your hypotheses and the principles that you base them off of. You learn new things. You make a new prototype before you actually make it the thing that you're delivering to market.
Yeah,
just adding. I believe, standards will emerge, right? And naturally, there is a free competition. Protocols will emerge. Developers will try different things, and good things will establish themselves. And I think there is a big puzzle that all of us are assembling together. And in terms of who is going to drive innovation forward, coming back to our original question, at the beginning of the internet, when TCP/IP was created as a protocol, we have the whole world running on TCP/IP nowadays. We even take it for granted, don't remember that. But people who created the first things on TCP/IP, they didn't know anything about Airbnb or Uber, right? So the people who create these interesting applications of the future using blockchains, they will come. I think our role is to create the protocols and give them the tools for these things to happen, right? So as long as we are able to tackle these very hard bottlenecks in terms of scaling, in terms of tooling, it's going to be much easier for us to see that going forward.
Shyam, I would like to give you the opportunity to pitch in, and then afterwards I would like to actually give the crowd the opportunity to also ask a question from one of the panelists here. So please go ahead.
So I think look, the role of blockchain or DLTs is just one thing, which is that trust the message, not the messenger. And there are plenty of use cases out there that need where that can happen on DLT, which is now happening off-chain, right? And basically, scalability is solvable. The issue is, if you think about it in terms of, I need to choose one chain and that's the fastest and I need to be there, you get outdated, you get dated very quickly. So if you're able to connect to all the ones that are fast and use that capacity, and then if there's the 112th chain that is even faster and you're able to go there without having to re-engineer, scalability, there is plenty of capacity there. It's just that all the current capacity is, or the users are going to this very crowded place when there's all of this latent, unused block space. And this is something that Layer 0 can tap into, and there's plenty of businesses that can come in and use it. So I think that side is solved, and won't take more of your time, though.
Danny, just quickly, you can take a minute. I think to the point that you were talking about, I think...
Make it quick, though, because...
Yeah, so we already have the protocol standards defined by each of the protocol, right? We have PIPs for Bitcoin, and then same for any other projects. The only thing that is kind of required is that I'm just taking an example, as in NATO, how they come together to have standard framework. We should have as projects to have that kind of framework. As you were saying that we should trust the message, not the messenger. So if we have the standard protocol for such messages to be trusted across layer 0, then I think that kind of establishes at a longer run. Yeah.
I would like to give the opportunity for the crowd to also ask a question. So who has a question here? I see this lady raised her hand first, so let me throw this cube. Please speak in the mic. Oh.
Good throw.
Okay. So question, and maybe mostly for Joe, building on that excellent explanation you gave of the difference between shared security at layer 0 versus a bridge. Is there a way to have the best of both worlds and use a layer 0 for shared security, but go cross-chain and share that security between different protocols like a bridge would get you?
Yeah, so that's one of the main things that we work on at Polkadot, is that we've already had this message format out for about a year called cross-consensus message format. I kind of talked over myself there. But yeah, that's the main idea about Polkadot, is that the different layer 1s can all specialize. I've worked on a couple that don't even have smart contracts on them. They just have assets. And then another one has governance, or allows groups of people to act as a collective. But they can send a message from the collective chain to the assets chain and say, hey, I want to move the assets from my account into some other account. And then when you look at it like that, a bridge is basically a transport mechanism. So you can even have in a single L1, 2 smart contracts on Ethereum that are interacting with each other. That is, in a sense, a message. One contract calling another contract is a message. It just happens to be in the same execution environment, and it just gets executed synchronously. Which, if somebody doesn't know, that it just means that the sender can wait for a response before they proceed. Whereas asynchronous just means you send a message and it has some instructions and you kind of move on after sending the message.
Shyam, you wanted to pitch in as well?
Yeah.
So, I was just going to finish. So if you think about messages in that context, a bridge is just a transport protocol that sends a message over it between 2 chains. So you can also have 2 blockchains in Polkadot that the bridge, or the messaging system, doesn't care about the message. It just sends messages between the different layer 1s within the network.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
So the issue is there are all of these protocols in which you can send languages or send messages, sorry, but it's interoperability or interconnectivity on one side and scalability is separate. So the user, I've sent a message to say another chain, but I'm waiting 20 minutes or one whole day for the whole round to happen. So it's about combining both the scalability and the interoperability in a consistent user experience. That's when I think it really works.
Just to add on top of
We're
that.
out of time, unfortunately. So I really would like to thank all the panelists for their contribution. I really enjoyed this discussion, and I hope this was insightful for the crowd as well. So thank you a lot for listening in, and thank you also all for participating here with me today as well.
Thank you back.
Thank you.